today's topic is User Experience Introduction for Siebel Business Analysts. The presenters today are going to be Natalia Volchika, it's going to be Alexander Misayedov, and myself, Yuri Sterauts. So we worked at Idea Portriga company, Siebel consultancy based in Riga, Latvia, Eastern Europe. Some of our colleagues like to think about us like as Northern Europe, but so we're kind of East Northern Europe, okay? So these are our pictures. All of us, we have a background working as a Siebel consultant, starting with development for myself and Alexander. Then we went into business analyst roles. Natalia started as a Siebel tester, then she evolved into business analysts, and during some time already we are, in addition to business analysis, practice user experience design in our project, which oftentimes are Siebel related, sometimes just UX projects with other applications. The Siebel slogan a long time ago was, it's all about the customer. So if we look at what is the most common word used in Oracle presentation or when John Bedford is explaining Siebel strategy, we hear a lot about experience economy. So we decided to switch the topic to it's all about the experience. If you kind of look at some McKinsey reports about the value, how well-designed digital applications increase revenue of the companies, you can find it online as well. Accenture is talking a lot that, maybe everyone has done its own fair share of customer experience improvements, and now we need to move into the business of experiences when we address customer problems more intuitively, when we design the product, what they need, instead of selling them the product we design. It's about also employee experience, which is the integral part of this all. So basically, everywhere you look now, it's about experience. So employee experience, customer experience, developer experience, it's all just the experience. In our company, we do a lot of trainings with Nielsen Norman groups, materials that we're going to show kind of mainly adopted from the training we got from Nielsen Norman Group. So Jacob Nielsen is the one who coined the term usability like 25 years ago. And his partner, Dan Norman, he's the one who came up with user experience concept or UX. And I just kind of recently watched the YouTube channel, and in one of the latest sessions, it was the question, how procurement can improve UX in enterprise worlds. And then Jacob Nielsen started to complain about like how terrible UX is for the enterprise software, and that's we're not buying it for the design or for the experience. We have a lot of problems afterwards, both with making users to learn the system and that we're losing productivity because it's too clunky or takes too many clicks to do. And basically finished off by saying that enterprise software is the most terrible, poorly designed thing in the current universe. So I think kind of he had enough of this already. So and if you want to go and see this 3-minute clip, so it's a bitly bad enterprise UX, and you can watch him speaking about this topic. We have been blogging before about 3 issues with Siebel UX. We adopted them slightly, but essentially it boils out to kind of few elements. So first, when we talk about Siebel UI being not modern, but we got these forum applets, list applets, and that's pretty much all we have. Like there, of course, 3 applets somewhere, and you can make cards, but nobody's really using those. If you kind of look at diversity or richness of UI component set, well, then we have to agree that, yes, Siebel has like pretty limited set of UI components and different UI layout patterns, and it limits creativity when we try to make the UI better. So, something could change if we unlock kind of modern UI component libraries into Siebel OpenUI. We can do it now, but this is like separate topic for a separate webinar. Another thing is that, which has nothing to do with Siebel technology itself, is that typically we have been adding fields and tabs for Siebel UI for years. Okay, so usually if you start talking to any Siebel customers, they have Siebel in-house for more than 10 years or even 20 years. And pretty much during all this time, they've been adding functionality to the Siebel without really thinking like how we can optimize, how we can make it cleaner. If you will, I can compare it to the kind of garage or the basement where we keep putting stuff without any system. And then eventually we start to complain, what the hell is going on? It's totally impossible to find any item in this garage or basement. And there's certain usability problems with these garages and basements, even though it has nothing to do with the technology, but really like how do we keep this UI organized and clean? And again, this is not the practice we're following. And maybe the final one, it is not just Siebel or Siebel, which has been in the company for 10 years, which have these UX issues. But overall, in the IT industry, in the enterprise system development, when we do system analysis and design, we really focus about the entities, what kind of views we're going to have, what kind of fields we're going to enter there. It's about functionality and how it supports business processes. We never consult the users and even think, is it easy to use? How many clicks is required? Do they understand what is shown on the UI? Can we optimize it somehow? It is never the practice of standard enterprise system development. And I think if we want to change something during this session, is to start or to share with you some of these user-centric practices which we can adopt in while we do system analysis or functional design or concepting, doesn't matter how you call it, and start improving Siebel usability through this process. Okay, and if we talk about the benefits, like why do we do that? Of course, it's some business value that we need to generate and justify the investment of our time into that. But again, typical complaints we hear from the business stakeholders or for the users that there are too many clicks to complete key tasks in the application, that we got this overwhelming number of fields. It takes ages to learn. And I don't know, like one customer has 300 videos to show to the new employees working in the branches in the call center just how to get started with the system. So these are typical issues, and I believe that some of them you might have as well. Then we kind of run this Siebel UX improvement project, and in the short term, what we see is that first we get user productivity improvement because the system is easier to use. We, through the UI design, been paying attention to how users work in the system, what kind of key tasks they need to perform, and we optimize it. Productivity is first most important gain in this whole UX improvement business. And then definitely start looking at, are users using the system more? Because especially if you look at the Siebel sales role, you cannot really say that they are big fans of Siebel, because they rather see it as a tax and something which makes their life easier. If we optimize things through for them, if we making critical tasks super fast, then adoption grows as well. And definitely we have less time for onboarding. In the longer run, it means that as users get productive, we get smaller backlog of overdue tasks, and eventually the business processes start to move faster. We also see employee engagement because we make it easier for them to complete their task, to meet their objectives. And everybody likes to work with modern UI and efficient UI. So, employees are happier as well. And of course, if we are able to serve our customers faster, if the employees serving these customers are happier and more knowledgeable and have all the information they need to serve the customer at their fingertips, eventually we kind of improve the end user experience as well. Okay, we will be using some terms here, not too many, but these are like critical terms you should learn if you want to sound like somebody familiar with UX. So first of all, there is this design thinking, which is like everywhere now. Effectively, it is the core process of user experience industry. And pretty much it works like this. We start our project with understanding phase, where we first try to empathize with the user. So we conduct research to build some understanding of who these users are, what are their priorities, what are their goals, what is their experience as they work with our application with Siebel, where they are, what are they complaining about, what is important for them, what is not. Then in the same understand phase, we start defining these problems. So basically where these problems are actually happening, in which particular steps, how big they are, what happens if we solve them, how big the impact is going to be. So this is all in the understanding phase, okay, or user research, as you might call it. Then we move to another phase, which is exploration. In the classical process, we start generating all the different ideas how we can solve the set of problems identified before. We present different concepts, how we could be solving those problems, vote on them, and eventually, as a team or involving the stakeholders, we decide what UI pattern or UI design we want to refine and implement further. And then we move on to the next stage, which is prototyping, where we build a high-fidelity UI prototype, which is covering the user flow end-to-end. And actually, the goal is just to see how it could look like. And then as we move to the next stage, which is materialized, we go back to the users and using this prototype test if this new UI design we came up with is really able to solve the problems we have identified during the research on the previous phases. If we see that everything is fine, then we move on for implementation. If we see that some things need to be improved, then we go back and do UI design iteration and then go back and test it with the users. Now, I can argue that being kind of business analyst myself, I have these skills already to some extent, especially the one which relates to the initial phase of understanding the users. Because as a business analysis, I would also start my process or my work with understanding and gathering requirements. So I would talk to the subject matter experts. I would talk to the stakeholders to understand their motivation. People who worked in the particular business process before, they could explain me all the little details, like why the things need to be done in a certain way. And eventually I understand, what the requirements are, and I'm kind of formulate them in one way or another. Then if you look at the UX, it is kind of the similar process, but instead of talking to the subject matter experts, we also look at how users are performing the same business processes in the Siebel application. So how do they click around the application? What information do they need to fill in? How many clicks it takes them to arrive at their task? How frustrated they are? What they're complaining about? What is their perspective? Where they stumble? It is about talking, about gathering all these different pieces of information. And once we've done it, we move to this solution design phase. Or if you kind of look at the UX world, then we need to start the UI design. So this is again where me as a business analyst try to make sense of all the requirements. I might be talking to the developers to get their input or to the architect on the team. Definitely, I also try to understand what is the out-of-the-box functionality of Siebel so that my solution can be implemented with a smaller budget. Sometimes if I understand that the solution is getting too complex and there is simpler way to solve it, if I tweak requirements a little bit, I go back to the stakeholders and the subject matter experts to agree this change with them. Similar activity we do with UI design. So obviously we need to align with the developers what is possible with our Open UI toolset. Now there are ways to create like really fascinating Siebel Open UI with modern frameworks, separate topic, but still we discuss with the business stakeholders if this UI design really shows the process we want to build into the system, like how we're covering all the cases and stuff. And if I see that maybe some of the UI pattern development could take too much time to develop, I can go back and tweak design in a way so that it's faster to implement and we kind of end up with a solution sooner without wasting too much money on that. And then when I have this design in my mind, see the solution design or UI design, I do the solution review or sign off that subject matter experts, stakeholders say, yes, this is exactly what we need. And the same goes here with verification with the users. So we run another round of tests with the users, making sure that the problems we have identified during the research phase are solved through our UI design we have done during UI design phase. As a business analyst, I think that the easiest area to enter or more natural task we can do in this UX is research. One key tool we need to know here is called user journey map. So basically, all the research that we are gathering during our meetings with the customer, during the usability test, etc., so we assemble in this user journey map, which typically has the following format. On the top, we would have Siebel user role or actor or persona, if we go into UX lingo here. Here would have also scenario, basically what use case or tasks in the system the user is performing, or like what part of the process he is performing or sub-process. And then here we would document the business goals, the user goals, so everything we get as an input into this. And this is like zone A is the lens. So then there is zone B, the experience. We highlight the phases, like on the big chunks of the activities that user needs to do in order to walk through the scenario end to end. Then here we also track all the actions that users are doing within the system or maybe outside of the system as well. And then we try to capture the thoughts, the emotions, the quotes, and something which is final or illustrate here as well. At the end, we try to capture all the opportunities. So basically, as we discuss about particular step in the process or about some activities, and there is some insight coming to us, so we capture it as opportunity, like how might we improve certain piece of the flow or activity or something else as we have. And this is sort of the final deliverable of the research phase, which summarizes pretty much all the aspects in one concise form. So A4 or A3 page should do it for you. And then in order to get this all intelligence, there are many different research methods that could be used. And traditionally, they are split into axes. Like one is, are we using qualitative tools or quantitative? So with the qualitative tools, we try to answer the question, why there is certain issue with the users and how we might fix it. And then with the quantitative one is more about how many users are completing this task or how many issues they are facing here, in how many cases they end up with an error or confused in their flow, or what is their opinion about particular functionality of the system. And then on another scale, we have attitudinal methods, basically to understand what people are saying about their experience as they use Siebel. And then there is this behavioral one when we actually try to understand what they actually do in the system and how it actually works for them. And typically with all human beings, what people are saying and what they are doing, usually they are two different things. There are plenty of methods how we can do this research, but being pragmatic and understanding that this is still Siebel world where UX is not huge budget line we have on our disposal. So we try to make it also pretty pragmatic. So typically what we use is some analytic. If we have connected user pattern tracking, we can make sense of what type of the screens are being most used within our application. We can start our research with running some surveys just to understand what is the overall feeling of the users related to Siebel and other things. We can go like more particular, but still kind of the main methods we're using, they are qualitative. So we either do the interviews, asking people or users about their experience. The one we like better is this, what is called contextual inquiry. Basically, when we visit pre-COVID times and hopefully post-COVID times, their office, we sit together with them and observe how they work in their natural environments. And as they complete certain tasks, we kind of ask along what they are doing, why they're doing it particular way, and stuff like that. And then we have this, what is called usability testing sessions, so qualitative usability testing sessions. So, and again, if we want to build this UX lingo, contextual inquiry is something you can learn and or remember, and also usability testing or user testing is another term you can pick here. Let's say if we dive a bit more into the detail, how Idea Portriga would conduct the research if we join a new customer, which we're not familiar with. So before starting any research, we would do what is called problem framing, a set of the activities we do with the stakeholders in order to understand what are their priorities, where they see the problems, and build some alignment on the scope of this UX exercise, basically what particular process step or tasks within Siebel we want to optimize. And typically, if you do everything by the book, we have this defined problem statement. So saying that our user customer persona have the problem that particular task or issue needs where we indicate a situation, context, or process step. And the point is that our solution brings certain value to the business, saving click-through times, improving employee productivity, decreasing onboarding time, but also we see kind of what are the user benefits would be here. And once we've done that, so we can start setting up the user journey map. And typically this top row I mentioned with the user role, scenario, and the business goals, we could fill in based on this input. Then we dive into Siebel and the business process. Usually it take like 1 day for us to interview the process expert, Siebel expert. As you are already working with the system, you know the process and Siebel in and out. So maybe this is not what you need to do. But at this moment, we can start thinking about what are these high-level user journey steps or phases we can put in our user journey map. And also we start for this meeting with the user, which is the next day. I can say that here we would do this contextual inquiry when ideally we observe 2 users in their natural environment, like in the office, so that we see what applications they have opened, how is their desk organized, what tools they're using, and stuff like that. The idea here is that we just observe how they execute everyday tasks. We ask them to clarify certain things, why they do things certain way, how come they do it in this way. And we spend 2, 3, or 4 times, if we're lucky, with each of the users. And at this moment, we're able to get to the user activity level. So we understand what actually they're doing in each of the phases, what their goals are. And then this is like the good moment to prepare for the usability test, which is another day. And one insight we have is that we realize that if we have been designing Siebel business process in the very ordered way, like you can see here on the top, the way how users are using the system, it's totally different. And you can, get like really surprised, excited, upset, depends on your mentality. The final piece of this user-facing research is a usability test. So the idea is that on the previous day, we have identified 5 to 10 most common tasks they do. And we run this usability test with at least 5 users. We don't do it with the 10 users. We don't do it with the 2 users, because some of the research by Nielsen Norman Group says that if you do usability test with 5 users, you can identify about 80% of the usability issues. And if you do more, this number is not really increasing much. The idea is that we ask them to perform this task using the application, and we record it as well for later analysis. And the trick here is that after each of the tasks, we ask them to give us a rating on the scale from 1 to 7 on how easy it was to complete the task, how frustrating or satisfying it felt doing this task, and also how easy it is to make a mistake, especially if you are the new user. 7 is like very positive answer, like nothing needs to be improved. 1 is like really negative. And basically, if we end up with something lower than 6, we can start asking how come it was not so easy for you, or how come you feel frustrated about that? Where do you think it's easy to make a mistake here? And at this moment, we kind of start actually gathering a lot of detailed information where users are sharing their experience with us. And this is like really valuable piece of the information we're getting from there. If we've done that, we see exactly where users are struggling, with which particular task they have most of the issues. What do they think about their experience? What do they feel? And it's kind of overall gives us very good understanding on what they are going through and what is important for them. So even though it's a formal task to do, just very organized, very well planned, but we're getting a lot of this other non-structured information from the user, and this is like really critical. As we do these research activities, we fill in different parts of the user journey map, and I think we kind of covered them already. At the end, we will get together, maybe review some quantitative data if we have it available for us, complete the user journey map, and also if we want to get some quantitative evaluation of how good or bad usability is, then we use this pure score, which we're going to cover it a bit later. Okay, and then we know very well, based on this evidence we have collected, what are the current UX pain points, and we kind of try to split which ones we can solve through the UI improvements, and which non-UI items need to be addressed by the Siebel team or the process team. Alex, can you start from here?
Yeah, I will start. So if you look at the switching from the BA role into the UX world, you might start with searching by like what kind of roles are there in the UX world. And eventually you will end up with a quite huge amount of different phrases having UX and design, like different variations of these words in a name of the role. And it might be quite confusing and you will totally be lost. So to simplify it, like we will outline three main roles which are like significant ones in order to make your UX working in your organization or your project. So first is one as a UX researcher, then UX designer and UI designer. If we think about the transition from the BA role into the UX roles, the most like easiest ones and also the closest ones will be UX researcher and the UX designer, as Juris already mentioned before. And let's look into them in a bit more details. The UX researcher is a person who validates the assumptions and mines the facts, whether a certain problem can be solved, whether it's really a problem, whether there are some additional issues appearing, and if we're looking into the right area. As Juris already mentioned, there are like qualitative and quantitative research, and the main deliverable for the UX researcher is a report from such researchers. If we think about business analysts or system analysts, I think the most common one and which is already most probably used are the interviews, but also there are more research tools like usability testing or observations or analytics and so on and so on. Additionally, UX researcher can do part of like problem framing and how might we and problem statements, and also he might touch a point where he basically defines the exact problem and also tries to put his findings into the different frameworks like user personas, like journey maps and jobs to be done. Another role is a UX designer whose main responsibility is specifically to identify if it's a problem and if we can achieve a specific goal, and it's really the one that we should focus on. Then he might identify the research needs, meaning that looking into what fact do we really have and what are the assumptions, and then validate which of the assumptions we should validate in order to move forward with a solution. And also UX designer accumulates findings from the researchers and drives the process. So basically, if we come back to the researcher, you might see this edit PT letters, which are different phases of the design thinking: emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And the UX researcher is mainly involved in first two, like emphasize and define, and then in a test phase. But the UX designer is a person who orchestrates and is involved in every stage of the design thinking process. He also is capable of doing the research itself, and he might get some expertise in high fidelity or pixel perfect prototyping, and he might have a knowledge about the design patterns and so on. But the main focus is to define the problem and put findings on the framework and then orchestrate the whole UX initiative. If we move to the third one, which is quite far from BA role, but is pretty important one in order to have the UX working, the UI designer who makes the solution prototypes like detailed enough for the implementation and can pass them to the development. His focus and his main deliverables are design specifications, quite detailed, like high fidelity prototypes. UI designer knows heuristic and usability principles and Gestalt principles like visibility of the system, match between system and the real world, like closure, proximity, continuation, and so on and so on. He is also capable of applying cognitive methods and is aware of different psychological aspects like attention and the memory of the users and so on and so on. And this one might be quite complicated to get into from the beginning, but there is magic wand which might help to fulfill this role. And I will pass word to Natalia.
And the magic wand about what Alex was speaking is a design system, basically a tool which allows you to create a nice user-friendly UI, even if you are not an artist. But in reality, the design system is the source of truth which groups the rules and principles that allow a team to design and develop a product. And usually design system includes style guidelines, component library, and some other like brand identity rules. Today in the web, you can find plenty of examples of different design systems, and here is the list of most popular design systems available in the public. For example, Google Material Design, IBM Design Language, Salesforce Lightning Design System, Polaris, Airbnb, and even more. When you start to invest into design systems, you increase your product consistency as everyone in your team builds using same components, and as a result, the design is consistent across different platforms and products. As well, you minimize time to market because now the design will take less time. You will have common language with developers because they will know and will be familiar with components you are using. And as they already are familiar with components, so they don't need to do them from scratch, so they can reuse already from the code what was done previously. But of course, there is one disadvantage, if we can call like that, to have a design system. With design system, you cannot express all your artistic skills, but today we are speaking more about the people who don't have all these artistic skills, but still would like to create a nice and user-friendly interfaces. So maybe not a problem at all. So everything sounds good if you have a design system, so you know how to behave, what to do next. But what to do in case you don't have a design system? You have only branding rules like colors, maybe typography, styles, and you're ready to use React or Vue.js to build your UI. So what we can recommend to start adapting existing design system, for example, Google Material Design to your needs. And later I will show to you a real example how we adapted Google Material Design to our needs and created our own design system. So the thing you need to do, you need to choose a tool what you will use to design and prototype the UI. Today, market offers different tools where you can build, prototype UI, and even store your design system. However, tool selection depends on your needs, your expectations, and of course, your budget. We really love Figma, and it is the reasons why, because Figma allows the real-time collaboration. It has version control, it has shared UI kit, so basically you can create team library of different components and use inside your team. It is cross-platform, no matter do you have Mac or Windows, or even you can use online version of Figma. Figma allows you to keep everything in one place, starting from colors and finishing with high-fidelity prototypes. And Figma prototyping engine is quite expanded, so you can build a really high-fidelity prototype in an easy way. And now let's see how we adapted the Google Material Design and created our own design system. So first, if you are using Figma, then in Figma community, it is possible to find the Material Baseline Design Kit, where already all available components are drawn, so you don't need to do them from scratch. And let's see how we did it. So first, we started with defining the colors. So it is the color palette of our application. So we defined like the primary colors, some accent colors, text colors, background. Next one, we defined how the text will look, what are the for headings, for body text, and so on. And now when we have these colors and typography, we don't need to keep in mind what was the color code for primary color. Is heading 2 medium or bold? We always can refer to the text styles, what we defined here, and just apply the needed text or color style. The next thing, what we started to create our component library for our application. So we took material design, but what is most important, that we took only components what are needed for our application, and you don't need to use all available components in material. Just select the components what you currently have or you're planning to use. And then using Figma variants, we agreed all possible variants for each component. For example, for button, we agreed that our application will have 2 size buttons, medium and small, and button can have 3 types, like solid, outlined, and flat. And using this Figma variants engine, it is easy to define how each variant will look. And later, for example, when we will add the button to our prototype, we can easily changing properties. We can change the appearance of our button. So when the components were done, we started to create like organisms by combining our components into some logical parts of our UI. And here is like a big picture what we have. So we have some heading, how the heading will look, some cards like count card, opportunity card, the contact card. As well, we have some like structure for web panels, for example, for Kanban board. And all this is quite generic. So it allows us in the future to reuse this like element in any other place in our application. When the blended components basically were done, we started to fill in all application screens with the components and organisms we defined previously. And now what was needed only just to hook the component or like this organism or blended component and place it in correct place inside our application layout. So it was quite easy and fast. And in the future, if we will need to add a new screen, for example, we'll have a new section here. So again, we will need just to agree on layout what we will use, and then just fill it with available organisms or components. And when all the screens were in place, so we started to make our prototype alive. So with Figma prototyping section, we started to add like connection between the screens and telling how we should navigate from one screen to another. And Figma allows you to control even like the animation, how the transition should happen. You can control how the dialog windows should appear, how they should dissolve. Even you can control, do you need some background behind, and so on. You can still see that we are still on the same file. So it is one file where we have already like the colors, components, blended components, and the prototype. And it is not all, because from even this file, we can launch our prototype, see how it works, how it's behaved. Maybe we missed something. So we can click just OK, everything is working fine. We are happy. And then we can share this prototype with business stakeholders to give their feedback, or with other team members who are interested. And what is most important, we can use this Figma prototype to test our solutions with user before our solution will reach the development team. So we will have time to change if something is not working. If you feel that you would like to expand your knowledge about the UX, here is some resources that can be useful for you. For example, the certificates and courses. We recommend to pay attention to Nielsen Norman Group for UX certification. As well, Google recently has launched UX Design Certificate. It is for entry level. And Interaction Design Foundation, it is the platform where you can find different courses related to UX, UI, and overall this visual language. And to keep updated yourself with latest trend in UX, latest news, you can always go to some platforms as UX Collective or UX Planet, where you can find some interesting topic for yourself. Figma YouTube channel, if you decide to use a Figma as your design and prototyping tool, so Figma YouTube channel will teach you how to use Figma effectively. And one more resource, to Figma Material Baseline Design Kit, in case if you would like to start your journey with design systems and you would like to start based on material design.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Alec. That was kind of a quick introduction of what do we do with this UX, like what is it all about, what kind of methods and tools we can use for the research, how do we design UI itself, and all the beauty you can do with Siebel. Actually, the design system which Natalia showed, so we use it internally as we build our Nexus application, which is again topic for a separate webinar, and then she pointed you out to particular resources. Is Google free course now?
It is not free, but it's certainly not a high amount of money, around 60 euros or something.
Okay. Yeah, because like if you compare it to the official Nielsen Norman trainings, it's kind of very, very cheap, because Nielsen Norman trainings are kind of pretty expensive. But anyway, so if you kind of invest more into your training, or your organization is doing it for you, kind of the thing is that like how to actually start practicing UX while you're still doing Siebel. And the answer really depends on your organization UX stage, if you will. So for example, if you are working for one of these organizations which is already running customer experience transformation, so this massive program, like how we're gonna serve our clients in a totally different way, how we do optimize their journey through all the channels they're using to interact with us, either marketing or buying stuff or providing them with customer support. So you are pretty far down the road already. What you can do is you can reach out to the team which is in charge of this CX transformation initiative, explain that Siebel is used as one of the customer interaction channel, and then that you want to contribute to CX. And you can also say that you have some exposure to UX, so you know how to do the user research, user journey map, usability tests, and you are proficient with Figma and understand what is the design system is all about. From that point of view, typically amount of the scope of the CX team, it's pretty huge. They also typically are looking for some champions within the organization which can support them in their mission. And it also means that usually they would have already some methodology and tools established for your company. If you kind of ask for the initial support, probably you will be given one, but then you can carry on independently, asking or consulting them every now and then. If you kind of end up in this situation, so I think you have a pretty good chances to grow your skills in UX, and maybe if your manager doesn't mind, eventually move into this CX team and or whatever you have in the company. Okay, another scenario is that your business stakeholders, they kind of get UX. They understand this is important. They understand that there is an issue with that and something could be done. And basically, then it's also no-brainer how to get started. So you kind of pick a use case you want to improve. So basically, as I explained to you, do this problem framing workshop to understand what is the most hot potato at the moment from Siebel UX point of view. Do this 2-week-long user research and UI design mini project. Then, figured out if there is design system in your organization or not. If yes, get it into Figma. If not, use Google Material Design as the starting point and brand it according to your colors. And I think kind of the whole idea at this stage is that after this 2-week mini project, you should really focus on making like inspirational prototype. So something you can, show to the stakeholders, like this is what we can turn Siebel into, or also talk to your developers that, hey guys, wouldn't it be cool if you kind of could build that stuff? And hey, the open UI developers, you can, develop your career as web developers too with this whole approach. So UI designers or UX people need web developers, so Siebel web developers, and vice versa. So it's win-win in this scenario. So if we want to throw some numbers to quantify the impact, then pure score would be a very good method. So basically, you could say the score for the current user experience you have in Siebel, and then after your redesign, what you could achieve or how much simpler it would become, and also how much time you could cut with that in some percentages, if you will. Usually, there are also situations when business is not getting UX. So they think that UX is just make it flashy. Can we change the skin of the UI, make it look good? So they kind of do not really understand that there is a lot of advantages you can achieve in terms of the user productivity, system adoption, new user onboarding into that. And overall, they are not buying this whole UX idea. We shouldn't give up, but we should follow a scenario called Undercover Ux. Actually, while I was checking the spelling for this, I found out that there is a book on Amazon called Undercover User Experience, which probably kind of a detective story of UX person who's starting his journey in the hostile environment or UX hostile environment. So, but what you need to do, you just forget to use UX lingo. So if with this CX guy, you can talk about design system, journey maps, blah, blah, blah. Here, you should not use this word. So it's like forbidden. Otherwise, you will relieve yourself. Okay, what you need to do, just visit, spend a day visiting users in the call center, just talking to them and see how they use our system. Instead of talking about usability test, say that you do user flow business analysis to understand where the gaps are in the UI, maybe, and how we can speed things up. If you have a user journey map and pure score artifact, hide them, don't show it to anyone, and spend all the time you have on solving just one too many clicks problem, because too many clicks, it's something to which both users and the business stakeholders can relate very well. Too many clicks is bad, few clicks is good. Maybe it's not the case always in the real life, but this is sort of a common myth about UX, just cut number of clicks. And then what you need to do is just prepare this one awesome prototype which fixes this one problem you have selected, kind of show them the navigation flow you used to have before and how fast it can be now. And then basically sell this first idea that you can do more research and you can cover end-to-end flow with the users and basically get some more money and budget for the stakeholders and start slowly moving into this direction as well. I think in every situation as the BAs, we can do this undercover UX activities. Finally, we as a company who promote Siebel UX and really want to see better Siebel projects out there with a great user experience, we can offer you some help. So first, for all of the end customers who are attending this webinar or going to listen to it later on, we can offer this private UX workshop, which is pretty much the same content we have shared here, but maybe with more examples and maybe even with some hands-on activities suited to your situation at the company. Then another thing we could do for the first 5 end customers who apply, we can help you to set up Figma. So let's say that if your organization already have a design system, ideally with Figma, we can set it up for you and show you around how you would do these UI designs. And if you don't have, but just have some branding guidelines and font you're supposed to use in your company, and we can get Google Material Design and style it for your needs and give you kind of jump start with Figma, something we can invest like 2-3 days per each of the customer and the first one can get. The final offer is that we can help you to run this first UX project, doing user research and UI design with the prototypes in Figma. The first 3 customers who reach out to us get this project done free of charge. So it's going to be one of us who will be supporting, or 2 of us who will be supporting you in this small project. If you're interested, reach out to me. This is my email. Now this is the last slide, and we can have some questions and answers.
Yes, here's Alex. This is a very interesting presentation. Many thanks, guys, for this. That really stacks on our need to learn this tool for prototyping for UX. After it would have something, but so far as I know, in our project, we're not using, but it might be more trivial things used, but something more primitive. So this is nice example. It's very excited. Many thanks.
Thanks, Alexei. Yeah. Hey, Joao saying that they finished the upgrade from IP14 to IP 20.9 or IP just 20.9. Yeah. This session was not particularly targeted to web developers or open UI developers. So again, we just wanted to speak first to the business analysts and how they can extend their toolkit with these user-centric designs. But we will have another session later in April, which is going to be related exactly to how to improve OpenUI with the modern web frameworks. So like using either Nexus Bridge as an open source API library, which allows you to build UI using React, Vue.js, or Angular. And again, using all these modern design components, or again, using Nexus Face, or do it in some other way as well. Once again, if you want to get started and you need some help with this Figma setup at your company or running this mini project, just sharing the same content of this webinar with your team or colleague, please reach out to me and we will get in touch and arrange something for you. I think with that, we will finish the recording. Right after Easter, we should have it processed. We'll publish it on the YouTube and also publish PDF files. And again, if you need to get PowerPoint template before that, please reach out to me and I will send you one.